pure Australian right here. A frickin' kookaburra just ran into my window. Just smashed into my frickin' window. Hi, my name is Kevin Penkin and my job is anime. Hi, my name is Kevin Penkin. I'm a composer based in Australia. I write music for video games and anime and also some Western animation as well. Some of the works that you might know are Made in Abyss, Tower of God, Eden, and The Apothecary Diaries as well. When I was a kid, I found out that I had basically no skill except for music. I was also a huge video gamer. The game that sort of awoke me to sort of the beauty of video games was actually a game called Metroid Prime. When I heard that music, that combination of piano with ambient synthesizer for the first time, I was just like, I want to do that. Of course, discover Zelda and things like that. And then eventually, discovering other things that Japan has to offer, like anime, which really got me into sort of that culture. Started watching a lot of Ghibli, started watching Ghost in the Shell and being really heavily inspired by that, which of course led to Final Fantasy, which sort of, completed sort of the domino cycle, so to speak, of just being completely and utterly, I guess, obsessed with this art form and really wanting to be part of it. So I started out actually playing guitar. I remember vividly, because I was playing guitar as like a 6-year-old and I was getting taught by this pretty heavy rock and roll guy, and came to a lesson one day because I'd learned like some Wiggles songs or something like that. I was going to show it off to my teacher, and my teacher was like, "The Wiggles suck," and that as a 6-year-old was gut-wrenching to hear, and basically made me quit the guitar. I picked up the flute as a result of that. That sort of melody-centric sort of playing, because obviously the flute just has one note at a time. I started getting into melody writing, and then combining that with sort of my passion for the music in Metroid Prime made me want to switch from being a performer to being a composer. And that's what I did. I went to uni to do composition. I went to London to do composition for my master's, and have not looked back since. So when I started writing music for anime, it was actually doing a Kickstarter project, an OVA called Under the Dog, which was produced by a company called Kinema Citrus. Their next project just so happened to be Made in Abyss, and they asked me to do it. There was no realization at the time of what Made in Abyss would become and how it would influence my life. I was able to write music that was really quite sort of self-expressive, as well as also hopefully functionally appropriate for the show. Yeah, it sort of set me on the path that I'm still going on today. So after completing Made in Abyss, a couple of years later after that, I was approached by a lovely gentleman by the name of Justin Leach, who was creating a Netflix anime called Eden. If you're familiar with Eden, it involves both robot characters and human characters, and they interact very, very, very frequently. And I wanted to sort of distinguish between these two sort of voices, one human voice and one robot voice. How we did that actually was to have a solo violin, an acoustic solo violin, sort of represent the human characters, but then also have a electric violin represent the robot characters. What was really interesting about this particular electric violin is that it was actually a 6-string electric violin, and just to kind of pump up that even more, it was actually a first of its kind of 3D printed electric violin created by a friend of mine called Sean Riley. I don't really think of it any different. It's just more like going to another part of the world that you're already quite familiar with. I know it sounds cliche, but I really miss the food, but I have like really specific foods. So my first dinner when I get off the plane always is an egg sandwich or an egg sando. And I also really enjoy just grabbing a strong zero from Family Mart and squatting on the side of the Family Mart and just having a good sip of strong zero. But that's kind of my ritual when going to Japan. So working on anime internationally is kind of interesting. I live in the countryside, and so I'm having to dodge kangaroos and things like that. And, sometimes they'll jump into the backyard. But nonetheless, even if you live in the middle of nowhere like I do, working on anime is a very international thing. I've recorded in Prague and Vienna, recorded Eden in Nashville, for example, recorded in Japan as well many times, and we've recorded here in Australia. So I go to Sydney if I need to record a large orchestra or something like that. like we did for Made in Abyss. So yeah, there's so many options to just travel while also just working remotely in the middle of nowhere with your puppy and occasionally some kangaroos. I actually would really love to do a horror anime. You know, it's such a difficult genre to get right, but if it does succeed, or if it does, like, if you hit like just the right notes, pun intended, it can be just so effective, and I would just love to be part of that. Something really shocking, but not in a, you know, crass, overproduced way, just something that really traumatizes someone in a really cool way. That would be good fun. If I was to give one piece of advice to anyone wanting to do what I do, take your time to find your own voice. When we start composing, normally a lot of the music that we're writing is overly inspired by a composer that we look up to. And I've done that many times as well. But I think there is a satisfaction in eventually distilling your inspirations down into your own personality and starting to write essentially in your own handwriting. It'll lead people to know who you are as a writer as opposed to an imitator. People will understand you for you. And I think that's a much stronger way to go through your creative life. Well, my story, so to speak, I don't know how to repeat it. I do believe that if you work really hard, you go on a more chance to do what you want to do or achieve what you want to achieve. But there's no equation to this. It's like, you know, be good, try to be humble as best as you can, whatever that means. But, you know, like try and just be a good person and just want to achieve things in a earnest and honest way. Be confident in what you can do, but be aware that there are things that you don't know. Like, it's just, you know, just be a good person, or try to be a good person, and that's normally a good starting point.